So first of all, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our May Tuesday talks. Before I get started, Ron Dick has asked me to welcome Evelyn Shan, a Rotaractor. So welcome, Evelyn. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we hope that you enjoy the Tuesday talk. So our focus for tonight is on peace building and conflict prevention. Before I ask the chair of the district committee to introduce our speaker, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, please mute yourself. And the district governor team will be monitoring questions in the chat. So if you have a question for our speaker, please put it there. Personally, I have found that if I'm having some internet issues, if I mute myself and turn off my video camera, I seem to have less issues. So if you start to encounter that, I'll encourage you to consider that as an option. And so we'll begin with Ian Lancaster, who is the chair of the district Peacebuilding and Conflict Prevention Committee, to introduce our speaker. We have an hour for our, almost an hour for our speaker. And then at the end, District Governor Mark will thank the speaker and wrap up our Tuesday Talk series. So over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Past District Governor Beth. Martin practiced landscape architecture for 20 years before becoming a professional mediator and international trainer, using his skills to design systems to connect humanity through social entrepreneurship, environmental sustainability, and peace building. Regarding his interests in environmental sustainability, in 2008, Martin founded a business which was successfully featured on ABC's Shark Tank. The Living Christmas Company is a social benefit company which rents living Christmas trees and employs veterans and formerly incarcerated individuals. He is a 2017 Rotary International Peace Fellow and currently an Institute for Economics and Peace Global Ambassador and Positive Peace Activator. Martin holds a Master's of Negotiation, Conflict Resolution, and Peace Building from California State University. Martin also serves on the board of directors of the National Association for Community Mediation. He is the Global Partnerships Manager for Mediators Beyond Borders Int'l, where he has also been a co-leader for the Rwandan Project and co-founder of the Peace Conversation Facilitation Program. In 2019, Martin was recognized as Innovator of the Year for his efforts. In his free time, Martin designs restorative justice programs in schools for students and educators, is a volunteer mediator for the Juvenile Courts Victim Offender Program, facilitates community dialogues and trainings with law enforcement with the Institute for Nonviolence LA, and works in the prison systems with the Truth Project. Fellow Rotarians and friends, please give a warm welcome to my friend and colleague, Martin.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that warm welcome, Ian. Good evening, everyone. Amasilksa and Miha. The last of those is a greeting from the Tongva people. I am logging on from the Republic of California in the southern region, which was the former home of the Tongva people. There aren't many of them around any longer, which is an unfortunate reminder that the current pandemic is not the deadliest that this region has seen. And taking a moment to reflect that and that impact has had on our families in the current pandemic, and what that impact must have been like for the families who inhabited the lands where we're all logging in from previously. Speaking of your homes, I would like for us to do a little exercise on how we introduce ourselves today. And so what I'd like to do is give you 20 seconds to find an object in your home that you think speaks for you. So we have 20 seconds. Let's all go find an object, and I'll meet you right back here. Right. Welcome back, everyone. If you would hold your object up to the screen so we can all see each other's objects. Some of them living. Fantastic. And what I'll invite you all to do, if you would, is in the chat, tell us about your object. Introduce yourself by your name, perhaps maybe your club, where you're logging in from. If you know the traditional name of the people who inhabited your region previously or currently, and tell us about your object, if you would, in the chat, so we can all kind of get to know each other on a different level. I'll share mine real quick. It's R2D2, which would be called a talking stick, except it's ableism. R2 does not talk in the normal way, so it's a communication stuffy, and it's really convenient because you can toss it around the room. I've not been able to toss it around a room as of late, but he does get to hang out with me on the desk. Why that little exercise? One of the themes you're going to hear is how do we make the most of the opportunities we're given? And yes, we're tired of being on Zoom. What are the benefits? One of the benefits are that we get to meet each other in our homes. You heard Ian talk about when I was a landscape architect, and what I would do is I would meet people on Sundays in flip-flops and a linen shirt. Why? Because I didn't want to talk to the person they were at work. If you were hiring a landscape architect, congratulations, you're somebody. I don't want to talk to that somebody while they're at work. I want to talk to them while their kids are playing in the background, right? And so the things we think about as being interruptions, the dogs barking in the background, which they will inevitably do, someone talking and you're on mute, we think about those as distractions, but when the fact of the matter, what they are is reminders of what's most important to us. And the way that we're able to hear and see each other is different even than how we used to meet at the meet in a restaurant versus how we meet and hear each other in our homes. And the ability to speak from your heart and hear from your heart when you're in a space that feels safe and familiar to you. And so we can harp on how challenging this is and how much I would love to be able to hug you all and do the handshakes and talk after the talk with each other. Or we can look at what are the opportunities to reach out to folks in a new and a different way than we had before and learn something about them that we hadn't before. Julie Weiss, I believe. What was your object? You mind sharing it with us?
Sure. My object is a bird, and these days, as I sit at my desk, I've placed it right by the window so I can watch the birds during these days when we are stuck at home so much.
How about John Clark?
Yeah, there we are. Whoops. Hit the wrong button there. Come on, get back.
There you are. Oh,
There, okay. There's my little creature right here. This little bird that my daughter gave me. And I have her in a little flock that goes with her. And I keep that handy because frankly, it reminds me of my love of animals, all of them. I have a little bulldog who's asleep by the fire right now, or otherwise I'd have her out here as well. But I'm all in favor of trapping animals that are not supposed to be here in this house with me with live traps, and I take them out to the barn and hope that this goose will look after them. But anyway, there we are.
Thank you so much, John. And one more. How about Fran Taylor? Do you mind sharing what your object was?
My object was my Women in Rotary pin that I bought at our pets training in March just before we shut down. So it was a reminder of better times.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for participating and sharing a little bit more about yourselves in the chat. So we'll get started. We've got a presentation that goes along and we'll keep popping in and out as we go and we'll see how far we get. So the talk I'm going to share with you today, I've sort of affectionately called 2 Drops for Peace. And in an effort to start seeing peace the way we see the other work we do in Rotary, and how do we inoculate ourselves, it particularly becomes important in times like this to think about what do we need to do to prepare ourselves so that we're ready when things occur. And the time to start is not after they occur, much like in polio. So if I'm mildly successful today, you will hopefully feel inspired. You'll feel more connected to one another despite the distance between us. And as we are people of action, empowered to do something about that. Quick little agenda for you. The first one, part one, is who the heck is this guy? Part two, we'll talk about the Mediators Beyond Borders or International Service Partnership. What the heck do we do? Part three, we're going to talk about expansion during a time of contraction, and what are the opportunities that we have, and how can we connect further with each other and expand Rotary, build on our community that we're so proud of. And then again, you'll always see this always gets back to what can we do about it. And I'm very much a proponent that peace is an action verb, and needs to be treated as such. So my story, part of my story we're going to start with, starts here. Anyone know where this is? Virginia?
Tuscany.
Yeah, that is Tuscany. So I was lucky enough to receive a scholarship to study architecture in this place. And this was in 2001. If you remember what happened in 2001, this occurred. And it wasn't in the morning for us, it was in the afternoon, clear as day. Watched it and thought at first that someone's Italian had been mistranslated, and then found unfortunately it had not. And so what happens, and why I bring it up, is what my reaction was that day was a bit disturbing for me. When I saw this occur, I thought, gee, this is how loudly someone had to speak to feel listened to. And what I saw was not someone that, yes, it was very sad, all the people who died, but the fact that the one person, the person who did it, would have that much conviction didn't mean they were kind of on the fence about it. They didn't 99% believe in what they were doing. They 1,000% believed in what they're doing was the right thing to do in that moment. And when you use words like terrorist and crazy person, it pretends like you know something about somebody that I know nothing about, what it's like to have that level of conviction. And so that was difficult for me. And I'd spoken Italian at the time, and so was asked to speak on behalf of Americans in Italy, and could find words when asked to speak that sound a lot like la paura manifesta in molte forme diversi. Fear manifests itself in many different ways. These ways, unfortunately, are not always passive. But when we're able to come together like we are today on this Zoom call, we can better understand each other's fears and move forward in a more peaceful manner. And so knowing that meant that it was going to be tough to just be a landscape architect moving forward. But making a living drawing pictures was quite enticing. So I did open my office when I got back, and I've been fortunate and blessed to be able to do work around the world, including Dubai, India, places like that, and had a lot of fun doing so. But I bifurcated my life at that point, as Ian talked about, and started this fun little business. I'd worked in nursery since I was 14 and thought, why in the world do people cut down trees to bring them in their house? If it was in your front yard, you wouldn't do it. And so I got to be able to have fun doing this for the last, I don't know how many years now, but we keep doing it every year, and I think I have a lot of fun with it. I also joined a school board when I was 21 years old and found I loved being in the classroom, loved working with youth, didn't love school board so much. And that's how I got into mediation, is being able to work with kids and doing peer-to-peer mediation, doing large dialogues with the police department, being able to train youth to do this work. And it will come as no surprise that they take to it much faster than adults do, because there's far less unlearning to do. And that's when I found Mediators Beyond Borders. So I got to combine my love of travel and being around the world with this new kind of found career path of what I wanted to do. So from 2007, I got to volunteer with Mediators Beyond Borders and been in fun places around the world doing so. And wanted to share some of those values that I think are really, really important, and what makes such a great partnership with Rotary is the first one is we're invited to go places. We don't go around searching for problems. We wait for people to ask us to go to these spaces. we also don't do anything. We only work in collaboration with our local partners. And what this is a value says there's always local resources, there's always local talent. And so this value requires us to both work them, understanding the cultural context that we're working in, understanding the effects of trauma on the people we're with, and do no harm. And lastly, we're always multinational, and this will have representatives from that country, but from other countries as well. And so we can always have this global perspective for the work we're doing. So these three seemingly separate things kind of came together. Felt like I was living these three different parallel lives until someone told me, well, you should apply for the Peace Fellow program. And I thought, really? And sure enough, some folks thought that would be a good idea. And so I got accepted into the certificate program in Chulalongkorn. And when I walked in, you see that picture up on the left, I walked right back out. I got in that room and went, what in the world am I doing here? Looked like the UN. Turns out, almost everyone who walks in that room thinks that. What am I doing with all these really smart people with all these different experiences? And the reason why people think that is because there are no experts at peace. And even the folks who've been in the field that brought it to us, no one said, hey, we did this in Sri Lanka and then applied the same format to Nepal and it worked great. You guys should do it too. No, it's a series of, we tried this here, this worked, this failed dismally. So we tried this over here in Mindanao, that didn't work, this worked over here. And so it turns out what gets you a seat at the table is not how many books you read or how many years you did in school. It's your passion and your commitment to a process that is far from linear and far from instantly gratifying. One of the lessons that stuck with me was one of our professors brought up this chart, and a lot of you will recognize this as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And a lot of the work we do in Rotary is based on that. You know, can we get to that first part? Can we food, shelter, clothing? And it's satiating because you can measure those things, and you get that kind of feel-good feeling for creating that. But the idea that creates security and community and identity, this professor said, well, yeah, I get that. But I've lived in communities that didn't have proper food, shelter, clothing, and they'd certainly say they had a sense of community and identity and self-actualized. However, if that community over there threatens to take away this community's identity, well, they might go to war. And when you go to war, what do you give up? Food, shelter, clothing, community, security, all for a sense of identity. So I said, when we're talking about conflict, turns out it's upside down. It's really identity becomes the most important. And what's great news about this is that honor and dignity are free. And it's something that we Rotarians are particularly good at delivering. So this other gentleman, John Burton, said it, all conflict can kind of be broken down to these three sources. And I'll invite you to scan your brain and think of the conflicts you had over your last week or last couple of years and think, wow, what was that about? Did someone's safety feel threatened? Did their identity feel threatened? Did I not recognize them? Right. So another gentleman said, well, it's a little oversimplified, but we have these sort of 8 or 9 different pieces, and they call these essential needs. So universal essential needs. And I looked at this the first time, I was like, leisure, really? It's essential? And I thought, wow, yeah, you spend a third of your day asleep. It's essential. You'll notice that only one of these 9 has to do with food. The rest of these have to do with creating meaning, freedom, belonging, affection. And so it's a different way of looking at these when you see them all together. And our ability to meet our universal needs is what creates peace. And Geiks is how you'd say peace in Niska. Another way of saying this is positive peace. Those of you familiar with the work of John Galton and the Institute for Economics and Peace will notice this split. I'm talking about what negative peace is versus positive peace. And who amongst you knows? John Burns, you know the difference between these two?
Put me on the spot. Negative peace is probably when you do nothing, and positive peace is when you do something to try and achieve it.
Yeah, pretty close. It's in there somewhere. So negative peace describes just that state of not fighting with each other. So if we're not actively at war, we're not actively in conflict, we call that negative peace. And I would propose that it's a type of peace that a lot of our Rotary clubs do achieve, and it's almost like a politeness where we don't really say the thing. And some call it conflict avoidant. I prefer to call it pro-harmony. We're together for such short amount of time. Why do you really want to talk about that, Randy? Really, right now, you want to bring that up? But what happens when we don't bring it up over time and continue to avoid it is folks just leave. All of a sudden, Randy, who's been a Rotarian for 12, 15 years, just left sites, oh, work and family. Wasn't work and family for the last 12, 13 years. But do we have a mechanism for being able to engage with one another and sometimes make it uncomfortable and engage in a way that we're able to see each other's needs? So I mentioned the Institute for Economics and Peace. So they came up with a way of measuring this within communities. And it came up with these 8 pillars of positive peace. And so you say, well, if you have a well-functioning government, a sound business environment, these are the markers and metrics of what it takes to create positive peace. And so what I did is sort of overlaid what we know about conflicts into this and say, look, what you're really doing is measuring our ability to meet our universal needs as a community and as a society. And what happens when these are not met, when people don't feel a part of this? And so this comes from where that origin of conflict comes from. And we'll talk about international conflict. There really is an international conflict. What we've seen over the last several years in particular is conflict comes from communities, particularly divided communities, particularly people who don't feel connected to the communities they're in. Even international organizations, ISIS, Qaeda, Boko Haram, where do they recruit from? Disaffected members of communities. Those are communities that Rotary is in. We're in those communities. What are we doing to actively engage on it? So we think about conflict prevention in a positive peace lens of actively being a part of achieving positive peace. We need to look at who we are connecting and how we're connecting with them. So as I mentioned, these are just the dots where we have Peace Fellows. And I think this map is probably 4 or 5 years old. I think there's several more by this point. And so I stop talking about what's the opportunity for Rotary. What's the responsibility for Rotary when we know this about conflict and we know that we're in a position to do something about it? And one of our professors, another thing that stuck with me, said you can't vent in resiliency, however, in a crisis. And too many of us live in communities where you think, wow, that'll never happen to us. But there hasn't been a size of community in the last 3 or 4 years that hasn't experienced violence, whether it be a rural community, it be a quiet community, large metropolitan city, have all experienced violence. So the size of your community is not what keeps you free from it. Now we had this other event. I'm not sure if you've all heard about it, but there was a pandemic over the last couple of years, and wreaked some havoc on the way we do things. The very core of Rotary of how it was affected because we're club bottom driven organization. What happens if we can't meet with each other? So well as you can't invent resiliency in a crisis, you sure can spur innovation. And what are you going to do with the opportunity that you had? And so it reminded me again, and so it sound like a record going back to what I learned in those 3 months, but I had another professor, and this poor sap's job was to go into Liberia at the height of the Ebola epidemic. At that time, 80% of the people were dying of Ebola. Dismal. So he lands on the ground, and one night, he's sitting in bed and just racking his brain going, what am I gonna do? 80% of the people are dying. Well, what does that mean? 20% are living. What happens if we tell the story of the 20%? And so what we started doing is meeting with them. What do you have in common? And over again, it was those who had stayed in community, those who felt comfortable saying that they were sick so they could share it so they didn't spread it. And then they had that hope that they would get better. And that was what changed the storyline, is being able to surface these problems, not have people isolated from their community or feel like they're going to be ostracized so then they continue to spread it, but actually be able to say something, be able to be treated, held by their community, and see that they're going to do better. And so when I started hearing about things canceled where we can't go, and I won't lie, I was looking forward to going to Honolulu and rightfully disappointed when I wasn't going to be able to go. But I also felt that dread of, wow, there's lots of things we can't do. Well, what can we do? And so I'm part of this vast network where I think there's over 1,100 of us, might be 1,400 of us, Peace Fellows. And we tend to be rather tech savvy and fairly well connected. And so we set out and I said, what if we talked about peace in a way that people could finally understand? It's not this transient kind of loosey-goosey bunch of hippies talking about it. But what if we could talk about the area of peace as a way to connect with one another, to actively meet what our universal needs are? A lot of those having to do with meaning, connection, belonging. And so I had this idea to put on a cyber peace conference in lieu of the actual conference. And this time Rotary hadn't come out with anything. I said, we can do this and we can connect people virtually. NBVI has been doing this work over Zoom remotely for years. And so I know that it's possible to create community online. And so in just 2 months, we were able to put together a team. We had a 24-hour conference. And what that means is it started for probably the first time, started in Asia in the morning. And so every person, every peace builder got to present from their own time zone, and they would overlap with Europe and Africa's time zone. And that would then again overlap with the Americas. So everyone got to be part in their time zone. I had 140 Rotary Peace Fellows raise their hand and say, I will volunteer for this. 200 speakers creating 75 hours of content, and 147 humanitarian organizations participated in over 1,500 participants. That 147 is a number that sticks out for me because often what I hear, not everyone knows I'm a Peace Fellow, all I often hear is Peace Fellows' ability to give back, or their value is how often are they speaking at clubs, how often are they speaking at a conference. I think it's missing the real value of what these 1,100 different Peace Fellows bring, which is the networks that we can connect Rotary to that Rotary by itself may not be able to connect with. And so 147 different organizations coming to this event shows what the value of the investment that you all are making is, being able to expand Rotary in a time when things are contracting, being able to show Rotary as a leader in the peace building world. And so I would be remiss and probably if I didn't say we're doing it again with a little bit more lead time than last year. And so the 24-hour conference will again be on June 14th. We have 4 different time zones this year to make it just that much easier for folks to participate. I think there was somewhere in the 200 or so different applications just to speak. Now there's another gentleman who had a very grand plan for a conference, and his name was moment. Yes, it is. DG Dave Hamilton. It's difficult because Dave just passed away about a month ago, and he called us. It's funny because we were talking about the peace conference in Vancouver, and Dave had been a part of it and got to be a part of our session. And we had this interactive piece where people run around in different tables doing things. And at the end of it, Dave exclaimed, he said, I thought to myself, when I grow up, I want to be a mediator and I want to do this work. And so when it came time to plan his conference, he reached out to Mediators Beyond Borders a full year and a half, 2 years, actually, 2 years in advance, reached out to us and said, here's my vision. here's what I'd like to do. I became a Rotarian in Terrace, which is adjacent to the Nisga'a Nation, and I'd like to involve them in our conference and do something on territory. Don't know how to do it. And so reached out to Mediators Beyond Borders for how do we do this in a meaningful way, in a way that feels like family. And so what we were able to do with that opportunity is pretty amazing. And I think can be a model for how Rotary districts, certainly in Canada, but around the world, are able to engage in an honoring way. So we got to work with the Nisga'a Nation, and that relationship transformed as well. So previously, when we first got on, having a phone conference with the Nisga'a were sort of awkward and weird, and you know, because we're in-person people, we meet in person. It's how we do meetings. Until the pandemic came, and we were forced to meet online. And then we had a skill set that we could share the other direction. And so we got the opportunity to do a training on online engagement and community building with the Nisga'a Nation. And they got to be a part of shaping, you heard him talk about the peace facilitation program. Well, it turns out, by no fault of my own, the way I do trainings is neo-colonial. It's the way I was taught. It's the only way I know how to deliver a training, but is inherently in a linear fashion and with metrics that are set up by that institutional way. And so how do we influence this training in a way that speaks to the indigenous values of the people that we're working with? And so we co-design this process. And I'll give you a few examples. So the word community, and because my brain wants to have an exact definition of community, I said, well, how do you say community? Well, Getsalp. That's how you say community. And you need to know that Getsalp actually means village, which can mean divisive because there's 4 different villages potentially fighting for resources. And so not what we mean at all. And so the term Site Kilm Got is actually a far better term, because what that means is one heart. And it is the value of the nation that we speak with one heart, and the idea of one bowl and one path. And so that's what transitively means community. And so you need to know that there isn't an exact translation. It'd be really neat if there was, but there's a meaning and there's a way of going about something that's actually more important. And so when we did the training, we were able to speak with an elder in how to design each of these pieces. Here's what we're going to be talking about. What is the logic, or what's the wisdom and for community? What does that say? And she said, well, we don't have wisdom around this. We have laws. And so this one's going to be a little more challenging. Dem huachil keem goden silgaten. And what that means is to listen with your compassionate heart. So when we talk about listening, it's not a suggestion, it's a law. And she explained to me why that is because in the wintertime, we'd all live in these longhouses. And so you had to get along. You had to be able to listen with a compassionate heart, because if it didn't, it was not going to be a good scenario for anybody involved. And so what I wanted to do is give you all an opportunity to listen with your compassionate hearts. So I'll go through the rules of this real quick, and then we're going to try this in breakouts. See how it goes. So first, when we go in the breakout session, ideally you get in there in pairs if I've done this even remotely well. And just make sure, yep, that's even an option before I promise you something. Yep, we can do breakout rooms. The first person, the speaker, is going to describe a time when you felt inspired. Now, I'll warn you, because I've done this a few times, as soon as you get in that breakout session, it's going to be someone that you haven't spoken to in so long, and oh my gosh, you know, Eric, it's great to see you, and da-da-da-da, and talk about the kids, and you're going to decide who's going to be a speaker, who's going to be a listener, because you're going to be timed, and you only have 1 minute to tell your story about when you felt inspired. After that minute, the listener is going to repeat back exactly what they heard in the order they heard it in. Got 1 minute. Can't write it down. Avoid trying to fix anything, problem solve, try to relate to them. You're just listening, you're just repeating. And after that 1 minute of repeating back exactly what you heard, you're going to repeat, you're going to reverse and repeat it, meaning that listener now becomes a speaker. Okay. So with that, I am going to close that session. We are going to try a very adventurous breakout room here. We're going to create, I think, let's see, quick math, 19 rooms, sign automatically, and away you go. John, I'm going to put you in room 2. I put someone in your room. Let's see. Oh, Lars is not joined. I don't think I can put you back into that room. Let me see. Is it one that isn't anyone in there? Looks like you might have got left out, John.
That's
My,
okay, no problem.
my apologies. The 2 factors, math is one of them, and the other is the nature of some people not joining the room.
Maybe I did something wrong, as it came up that you should go to a room, so I said, okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Should I have not done that or what?
No, oh, I got the folks back. Danita, why don't you all do it here? You might only be able to get a chance to do switch one time, but why don't you choose a, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put you both in a room. That's what I'll do. I'm going to put you both in room 10.
That's with other people or not?
No, there'll be just the 2 of you.
Okay.
And so that way you can room 10, and then Danita, where did you go? Okay.
There's a
room
little
10.
note on the screen that says you're inviting me to join your room. Do I
Yep.
need to click on
Go
that?
ahead and accept that.
So Martin, were you heartbroken when you had to leave Tuscany?
He's busy enjoying his music. No, he's paying attention to getting people out of the
Over the
breakout.
breakout rooms.
One of our members, Marcy Tomasini, who's on the call tonight, is Italian and comes from that area.
Oh, wonderful.
Tuscany's his backyard.
We went and stayed at a villa in Tuscany. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Great place.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. First, before we get started, I'd like you all to invite you to take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Another deep breath in. And a long deep breath out. All right. How was that?
Interesting.
Virginia, how was it for you?
Wow, it really takes a lot of focus to listen very carefully. And I did discover the least little thing can throw you right off the listening. So, but it was very interesting, and it was interesting to see how sometimes we filled things in because maybe there was something missing in our story. So.
Okay, who was your partner?
It was me.
Oh, all right. John, how did Virginia's on mute, so I'll ask you, how did Virginia do as a listener?
I thought Virginia did very well. At the end of it, we changed places. So Virginia told me her story, then I repeated it. And Virginia laughed at the end of it because I went beyond her story and I drew a conclusion that is why she got involved in youth exchange. And she had a good laugh at that.
Yeah. So you heard her story and a bit of an additional story that came in along with that as well. Yeah. When she was repeating back your story, John, how did it feel to be listened to like that? To have someone concentrate and listen to you like that?
I thought it was quite interesting and strange in some ways, but I could understand why Virginia lost it at one part because her phone was buzzing in the background and she lost the concentration.
Yeah. I couldn't ask for a better example, John. Thank you. How about, is it Naveen?
Yes,
Yes. How was it for you?
good. My partner was Mike. Now, I want to ask you a question here.
Sure.
Are we looking at the exact word for word listening, or are we looking for the gist or the main message of communication?
In this case, it was to repeat back what you heard, whether that would word for word or not.
That is word for word, okay? In our case, I think we both, Mike was my partner, and we sort of veered a little bit from exact words, but we got the main thrust of the message for each other quite well. So that seemed like a good exercise to learning how to listen well. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel listened to?
I'm sorry?
Did you feel listened to?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And you said your partner was Mike?
Mike,
it was me. Yep.
Yep. How was that for you, Mike?
It was good. Naveen got, he was spot on with respect to the repetition of what I'd said, almost verbatim. And it was amazing how engaged he was in the conversation. So, and I felt very engaged in the conversation as well.
Yeah, wonderful. So would you feel you felt a bit of a connection with Naveen in that moment?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you have to agree with him in order to listen to him?
Not at all.
Yeah.
There was no judgment whatsoever.
Could you be thinking about anything else that have been successful at repeating that back to him?
Not a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt truly engaged in the conversation, as though there was nothing else that really mattered at that point to ensure that I was able to get it to get the gist of it.
Yeah, for sure. So question also over to Paul. Paul, how long was that whole exercise? How long was it? How many minutes was that? You're on mute.
Thank you. I think it was should have ran 4 minutes total.
Yeah.
I think we ran a little over.
Yeah, well, maybe 5 minutes altogether.
Yeah.
And to think that in just 5 minutes, you got to feel this connected to each other. How often, however, do we find ourselves saying words like, I can't listen to that person. I don't agree with the word they say. And what we're really saying is, I choose not to listen to this person because I don't agree with what they say. So I'll share with you another word, or symbol rather. And it's this symbol. And it means busy. And it's a Chinese character. In Japanese, it's isogashi. And it really is saying, it's the combination of absent-hearted. And it is what you're saying when you're saying, I'm too busy. For the people, often we use this word for the people who mean the most to us, our colleagues, our fellow Rotarians, our family. When what you know now is that in just 5 minutes, you can build this level of connection. What would it feel like if we shifted our language to say, hey, I've got 5 minutes now, or I've got 25 minutes at 4 o'clock. Now, this doesn't mean that you go without boundaries, because we'd also know what happens if I'm not able to be present for that amount of time that I've committed to. It makes it challenging to hear. And how we listen is another piece. So one of the reasons for not having you write it down was because of where you listen from. So that the Niska law was to say that we listen with our compassionate heart. It isn't, I listen with your compassionate brain. And if we got into our brain and started thinking, there's no way I'm going to remember everything, I should make this note and this, all of a sudden, we go in that space that Naveen was talking about of not actually hearing them, because I'm not listening to them with my heart. So huilen is to be fully present in that space. And to be serious, Singat Willem, is to be serious and intent about that message. Because we're referring to is a law that we listen with our compassionate heart. And there's another law that says the opposite, which is I am compassionate with the heart of others. And it's a law. And why? Well, it's funny because brain science tells us that when we're not careful with our words and trigger the other person, what happens? Well, they shut down. They're no longer thinking with their frontal cortex. The science. You go into fight, flight, freeze. I am not being able to think properly. I'm not being able to connect to you. And what happens to our memory system is we only remember threats. We don't remember the positive things about our environment. Well, when you're a narrative-based community based on the positive stories that connect us, as soon as you are triggered, you are no longer in community. And so that's why these are not just suggestions for them. These are laws, because they carry that level of importance. And so I won't read through all of these, because I'll share the slides with you so you can read them. You already know about the suspending judgment when you're listening. This one came up, letting go of winning and losing. When Charlottesville first happened, the neo-Nazis, and she said, wow, how do we win over a mind so full of hate? And my answer was to her, you got to give up winning. Because if you're trying to win, you're probably also not listening. I'll skip to this last one because I think it's particularly pertinent for us Rotarians, bringing service versus solution. Another way of saying this is bringing service above self. Yes, you have the right to respond. You have the right to your reaction, your opinion. But when we're listening, we're in service. And the service providing is just the listening. I'm not trying to solve your problem for you, because my solution is only half as good as yours anyhow. I'm going to put service above self. Doesn't mean without self, doesn't mean we don't have boundaries, because that doesn't make us a good listener either. But I'm going to put the service of listening first in what I'm doing. So as we wrap up and get close to the end here, there was a discussion in our country, you might have heard about it in the US, about building walls. And the numbers don't super support it. There was 85 deaths, and this was in 2017. We're national, and part of the reason, right, because we do have military and walls and all these things, great. But there were 17,000 homicides, and that should tell us, well, let's build a wall around our communities. Well, unfortunate, because 80% of the victims knew the perpetrator. So then you should put a wall around your house. Then you'll be safe for sure. Except that most of those people you were related to. So then you think, well, heck, I'll lock myself in my room because then surely I'll be safe there. No. 44,000 Americans that year committed suicide. And 1 more million tried. When you add obesity, drug overdoses, smoking, and drinking, you are 80 times more likely to kill yourself than to be killed by anybody else. But what are we taught since childhood? Be afraid of others. I want to just pick on Americans because the stat was worldwide. Over 800,000 people committed suicide in 2019, more than war, terrorism, and homicide combined. And I'm not going to leave you on a sad note, because we on this call have a solution. We have fellowship. It's part of what we do, who we are, is being able to reach out. And in those difficult times that it is difficult to reach out, I've heard narcissism described in a really new way, which is we all think of narcissism as I'm better off than you are. But a lot of us suffer from the reverse impact of narcissism, which says I'm worse off than anyone else. And it makes it difficult for us to reach out in those dark moments. And so what we're creating with our connections we have with each other is really a safety net of how do we keep each other safe? How do we keep ourselves focused on meeting our universal needs? And when you look at this symbol of Rotary, peace is built into the fabric of who we are. And so what if that sign as you enter this community said, this is a city of peace when you saw that symbol? What was that, what got associated with that Rotary symbol? Because that's what we do. We help this community that this sign is on meet our universal needs, and we do it together. And so with that, I'll leave you with the question of how you feel called to be in service. And if you're feeling clever, one of these, you hold your phone up to it. One of these will take you to the website. One of them will email me, or I'll just share my email in the chat. And I think, Lydia, you're on the call, and maybe you could share my email in the chat as well as the website. And with that, I brought us to the end. Thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you, Martin. By the way, we always do these silent claps. I think we should do a loud clap because I'm tired of silent claps on Zoom. One of those things I can never figure out is why we do silent claps on Zoom. Anyway, so just a couple of things. Landscape architect, hugger, Italian speaker, musician, Shark Tank guest, mutual friend of our late great friend and District Governor Dave Hamilton, and Rotary Peace Fellow. These are just a few of the sides of Martin. And I've really enjoyed your talk tonight. I do want to thank you for sharing your experience being a Rotary Peace Fellow, and also teaching us skills to connect with each other and ourselves. So Martin, on behalf of all the Rotarians from District 7070, thank you for what you do and sharing your skills to bring peace around the world. And for being here tonight, Martin, we will be making a donation in your name to the Rotary Foundation. So big thank you, and I hope to see you again at some point in time.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Thank you very much.
Just before we finish, I'm just going to plug a few things or make a note of a few things. Virginia noted the Rotary International Foundation Gala tomorrow night. Just quickly mention it. It's tomorrow, 8 to 9 p.m. It's described as a fast-paced 60-minute variety style show featuring Rotary dignitaries, celebrities, musicians, entertainers, and more. There's also a silent auction where you can win Alex licensed signed guitar. So I don't know who, somebody might be competing with me on that one. Ticket price is $110 US. You'll get a tax receipt for $100, along with 100 Paul Harris recognition points and credit towards your club's foundation goals. Check out the link from Virginia on the chat, or go to District 7070 website, and in the calendar, you can click on the event and register there. To those on the call tonight, this will be our last of our very successful Tuesday Talks sessions for this Rotary year. And this is due to the many activities taking place in June, including our very own district conference on June 25th and 6th, and the year-end celebration on June 30th. And as I just found out, on June 19th, the Rotary Peace Conference as well. So hopefully you'll be at those events. But stay tuned for July as Tuesday Talk starts up again in the new Rotary year under DG Ron. And there'll be a series of exciting and relevant topics taking place on the second Tuesday of each month, starting in July. And I think the first one will be on what's going on in the Rotary 2020, was it 21-22 year? So the strategic action plan and action items for the year. Talk about the Environmental Action Committee, DEI, Leadership Committee, and others. So that'll be an exciting event to kick off our Tuesday Talks in the new year. I also want to give a special thanks to PDG Beth in her role as training director this year for organizing and hosting these wonderful Tuesday Talk sessions. A loud clap for Beth. This has been a great way to spend a Tuesday evening every month for the past year. I have truly enjoyed these sessions. So thank you, Beth, sincerely. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Charles Bridle, our district secretary. He's the person behind the scenes, getting people registered, setting them up with the right link, and working diligently on many aspects of the event coordination. Charles does a million things behind the scenes that nobody knows about except for a few lucky people like myself. Thank you very much, Charles. You are truly appreciated for all your efforts. Thank you. So with that said, I don't know if there's anything in the chats. Is there anything in the chat?
There were no questions directly for Martin, no.
All right. So with that said, I bid everybody a good evening. Martin, thanks again. And I look forward to seeing everybody in the near future. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.